And we're live. Hello and welcome to Breaking Culture Live. My name is Sean Johnson Andrews, and I'm your host. I'm the immediate past president of the Cultural Studies Association, and I'm broadcasting from Chicago. We're really pleased today to welcome Matt Vetter and Zach McDowell to discuss some of the right wing disinformation about Wikipedia. As co authors of the book Wikipedia and the Representation of Reality, they are perfectly positioned to speak about this Wikipedia model and would even argue that this model makes it a better site and process for creating coherent and valid information, and that the real value of Wikipedia is community and change, values that could maybe save the internet. Bold claims, but we'll have almost an hour or so, plenty of time to prove them. Matt Vetter is professor of English at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where he's affiliate faculty in the Composition and Applied Linguistics PhD program. His research, which asks questions related to technology, rhetoric, and digital culture, has been published widely in journals such as the New Media and Society, Technical Communication Quarterly, and Computers and Composition. He's co-chair of the CCCC, I think that's enough C's, Wikipedia Initiative, a project that encourages academic participation in the encyclopedia, and managing editor at Writing Spaces, an OER project for post-secondary composition. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Happy to be here, Sean.
And Zach McDowell is associate professor newly, congratulations, associate professor in
Thank
the
you.
Department of Communication at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So he's a neighbor I haven't seen in a while. Focusing
Big
on,
city.
yeah, it's a big city. We'll have to see you soon. Focusing on information and media theory, policy analysis, and political economy. Zach looks at digital knowledge platforms, particularly Wikipedia, and emerging algorithmic AI systems and their implications for knowledge, representation, and access. His research critically examines the evolving role of complex digital environments in shaping public knowledge and information literacy, labor, and social justice. He's the co founder and editor of the Diamond Open Access Journal, Communication Plus One. Zach, it's been too long. Welcome.
Thank you. It has been
Uh,
too long.
uh, Wikipedia is celebrating its first 25 years, which should make some of us feel very old. But this longevity has not necessarily translated into the kind of respect and care that such a collectively produced resource should. Not only do we have the kind of public attacks from the right wing, such as Carlson spending a whole episode of his show vilifying the platform, but kids in school are still told not to use or at least not cite Wikipedia. And as Darius Jamelniak says in one of the articles you shared with me, it's looked down upon by academics despite it accomplishing what the academic community has still failed to create, a knowledge commons. Perhaps best illustrating this, his excellent article in Nature is hidden behind a paywall.
Yeah.
As scholars who have closely studied this research, maybe we can sort of start by, just telling us, what do you think we should see when we look at Wikipedia?
I mean, to go back to some things you just said, I think that uh, Wikipedia is, people still approach Wikipedia with this idea, don't use it or whatever. They are suffering from an anchoring bias that emerged from when it first came out. This is like as if you know somebody who is now a master's student, comes up to this person and they're like, oh, well, watch out if you know, I don't know, don't if you're for your runny nose, don't trip on your shoelaces or something like that, because the last time they saw them, they were
Right.
two, right? So Wikipedia has changed enormous amount. There are dozens of studies showing that Wikipedia is incredibly accurate. And now that doesn't mean it's perfect, right? Nobody's trying to say that, but then again, neither is Encyclopedia Britannica,
Sure.
which is online only now too. So, but I think it's important to kind of like see the importance of Wikipedia is not just the information, but the fact that information is constantly changing, the fact that there's a robust community that is actively trying to collect the world's knowledge as best they can. And that is a moving target. And that includes figuring out a lot of things around what counts as knowledge and what counts for reliable sources, and how community can engage together in ways that are productive on that. So it's a fascinating space, but it's also an incredibly important one, especially in the age of AI, because it's the largest single repository of information that every single LLM is trained on. So it's really important to think about it within the larger information ecosystem these days, and we need to make sure that we preserve it, and we continue to support it.
Yeah, you definitely touched on kind of a lot of the issues that we need to talk about today. It seems like. So maybe like to go to one of the things that I think is really important in your book on Wikipedia and the representation of reality. What are some of the sort of core pillars of this model? Because I don't think everyone, I mean, we most of us use it. It definitely appears at the top of all of our search results when we're looking something up. I just looked this morning; it's still in the top 10 most visited websites at the moment. It's like I saw today, ChatGPT is actually just one above it, but Wikipedia is still above Pornhub. So definitely a lot of people using it, relying on it. Um, how does this information get here? What are the core pillars of what Wikipedia looks like, or what the Wikipedia model does?
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. And, there's so many ways to approach the encyclopedia, and there's so many ways that the public, most people don't understand or misunderstand it. And when you talked about, students being prohibited from using it, in some cases, in high schools, it's still completely blocked, on any computer
Hmm.
in the school. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of like not only educating those students who we get in the post-secondary environment, but also educating secondary teachers about its importance. Because I still get students who say, "Oh, I didn't realize I didn't realize Wikipedia is an encyclopedia." So they're not only missing out on like just a general source of information that is freely available and that is kind of like becoming the backbone of global information and infrastructure, but they're also missing out on, what Zach and I have written quite a bit about are some of these core pillars, processes of Wikipedia that have made it such um, an important resource for information literacy and for information vetting on the web that's open, that's participatory, that's nonprofit, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's really nothing quite like it in terms of here's a place where we can actually process information to better understand its reliability, its
Mhm.
provenance, what it tells us. So I think the core content policies that I most quickly go to when I'm confronted with that question are neutrality, verifiability, and reliable sourcing. Okay, so neutrality is about balancing and weighing different perspectives. Is it always completely possible? No. It's a kind of a work in progress. It's an experiment. It's a thought experiment, but most editors are trying their best to present a particular representation of a subject in a neutral way, and reporting on what the secondary sources are saying. But verifiability is perhaps one of the most important advances of Wikipedia as the latest instantiation in the genre of the encyclopedia. because Britannica, other encyclopedias that came before it, didn't necessarily base so much of their content on verifiable secondary sources in the same way that Wikipedia does. And this is a really important point when we think about large language models and other AI-powered applications. They don't have any kind of epistemic responsibility towards provenance and where information is coming from in the way that Wikipedia does.
Right.
But those are some of the most important ones for me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was going to say, I just think that it's important to remember that, when we were kids, because we're, old folks at this point, but we were the last generation to have all you go in the library and it's got all the encyclopedias, and that's where you would go, right? Because those were the encyclopedias. And back in those days, they also said, do not cite from the encyclopedia, right? Well, it's because it's a tertiary source. We don't cite tertiary sources unless you're literally talking about the encyclopedia itself and things within it. You don't cite a tertiary source. So it's not. I feel like a lot of people get it very confused because they're like, oh, is it because of this, that? And it's like, no, you just don't cite tertiary sources. You go for if you're doing some research, you go for the primary data, and otherwise, if you're covering information, you're citing the secondary source. That's it. Like
Unless you're starting an essay and then you have to say, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? That's
yes. Unless you're starting an essay as if you were a freshman in an English class, in a composition class, who is about to get told not to.
Well, the sources are also really important, and the kind of the way that Wikipedia helps the people kind of make sense of what a good source might be. And one of the recent controversies in both the free press, by which I mean Barry Weiss's publication, I guess we could call it, and Tucker Carlson and one of the co-founders, Larry Sanger, take issue with the perennial sources page, which they have interpreted as a sort of mode of censorship. So maybe this is a moment to make an intervention here. What is this? What is this page? What does it mean? And why do people get upset about it?
People get upset when you tell them that their things aren't very good.
Sure. Unreliable. You really just shouldn't cite Fox News. That's one of them that they got.
And the thing is, so perennial sources page is actually kind of a complicated page, and I think I have my own issues with it because I actually think that using a color coding system is adding layers of hurt on these things. Where I think it's great to just use the tags that we don't. This is less good to use and things like that.
I need a badge of shame on top of it.
Right. The coloring, I feel like they're getting really hurt because they don't, even though they like, because when they see the red, it kind of more looks like pink, and it's making them angry or something like that. They're like, no. But perennial sources list it is just a list of, and it's an ongoing updated list about sourcing and how different discussions have came down to about their reliability. So these are RFCs, requests for comments, and people will have discussions. They'll provide evidence. It'll be a long discussion, and there will eventually be a decision made, which can, reduce how Wikipedia is currently, because this is an ongoing thing, currently kind of approaching this source as one tries to recognize the reliability of different sources, right? And certain ones, and really the thing is, no one really gets banned. There's no like blackballing, but there are ones that have been considered to be kind of significantly depreciated at times, especially when they continue to, when they were, especially for certain topics, right?
Sure.
Imagine topics like COVID-19 pandemic,
Sure.
right? And certain places such as, and I don't know if this is necessarily actually true because I didn't look through it, but
Here,
like
I'll share it. This is what it looks like if we're just scrolling through.
yeah, so and like, the Daily Mail or things like that would have been said, hey, this is not great. And maybe we're not going to use this for a while because of the ways that it says. Now, you can see a lot of these. There's a lot of different ones here. There's a lot of ones that you've probably never heard of because, well, you aren't going around looking at these sources, and there's ones that you have heard of, like the Daily Wire and Daily Mail and things like that, that are known to be very right wing.
Sure.
And then for example, there's also Breitbart, which has the gray, right, and Breitbart News was blacklisted. And links have to be whitelisted before they can use because of persistent ongoing abuse. Like, this is hard to do. Like, you have to show that you're doing this on purpose. So I think a perennial sources list is literally just a list, and you can see all of these different numbers in the to the right of the kind of status.
Yeah.
These are just links to longer requests for comments where people are discussing and presenting evidence about, if you go through in there and you click one of those,
Like these?
look at Broadway World.
For
No,
Broadway World?
these
Numbers here?
and then you also see ones where you get like, for example, the 2020, and these are larger discussions. So there's one for the American conservative, and then you can see these are longer RFC discussions, and larger discussions that are linked in there, where evidence is presented that they should be held in suspicion, or they've passed the test, right? And saying that this is considered to be a highly reliable source. Now, that being said, I do want to very much underscore that even in reliability, when Wikipedia talks about reliability, they and when they talk about neutrality, they specifically say there is no such thing as a source without bias. And even many biased sources make for reliable information, right? Because you know the bias, and what you're trying to get is the information out of it, not to pass the bias on to Wikipedia, but instead what you're doing is you're taking that information and translating it onto Wikipedia, which usually should not include all of the discussion, right? So biased information is fine. This is different. Bias is different than reliability. Reliability means whether or not they have an editorial board, whether or not that editorial board stands up and actually does retractions on obviously false information.
Yeah.
Right. It's are you spreading disinformation, or do you occasionally spread misinformation because you didn't know? And that happens. Everyone does it. New York Times does this. Chicago Tribune does this. Everyone gets it wrong every once in a while, but they can retract it. There are other organizations that will just continue. They don't care, and that's the key to reliability.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and so all of this, though, and when you look at that list, when you look at these conversations, I mean, I think what this also illustrates is the enormous amount of labor that goes into maintaining a list like that, maintaining any given page on Wikipedia. This is a really important and often invisible feature of the site, right? Of what makes it happen. Um, how is this sustained? What is, one of the things that you both write about in various areas is sustainability problems here with Wikipedia. How do we, how are people brought into this? Who's doing this work? Um, and what are the threats against it?
I mean, for the English Wikipedia specifically, because of course there's over 360 different language versions, but the English Wikipedia is of course what a lot of us access, and it's also the largest encyclopedia in terms of like main space articles, like the actual articles that people access and read. But you make a great point, Sean, about like what's happening behind the scenes, all those kinds of project pages or meta spaces, meta pages or talk pages that are largely invisible to the kind of everyday visitor are evidence of the amount of free labor for the most
Hmm.
part, right? That comes from what? Around, there are different estimates depending on like what you consider to be an active Wikipedian, right? But I think one of the more reliable ones is like around 130,000 volunteers in the English Wikipedia that are active, oh gosh, a certain number of times per month, right? So the
And those 130,000 people change, but
Mhm,
it's about that every month,
mhm.
if that makes sense, right? So some drop in and drop out, but that's about the average active users each month.
But when it comes to these um, really specialized discussions, such as that happen on reliable sources notice board, which is a kind of a clearinghouse for all of these discussions, like they're taking into account not only that particular source and the way it might have it's published by an organization with an agenda, but also its kind of spectrum of reliability across different article topics, right? Like that particular nuance is
Hmm.
ingrained into their process. Um, a lot of studies have tried to figure out why people would do this hobby
Sure.
of editing a general reference encyclopedia for fun or in their free time. Some of the things that I think it's still very much an open question, but some of the things that people have come up with are altruism. People like to give back to this project. There's a lot of really compelling rhetoric around, the online free encyclopedia that anyone can edit, and the kind of
Yeah.
utopian rhetoric that came out of the late 90s and early aughts. Like a lot of people were really attracted to that particular kind of rhetoric. But people also are motivated because they find that they get validation in editing topics that they are interested in. Maybe they have a lot of they have some knowledge in. It might be a hobby or something that they're specifically geared towards. And then when other editors interact with them and kind of like approve of their work, they feel that self-validation, right? Um, but
Hmm.
but since the 2010s, and then I'll pass it to Zach to see if he wants to say anything. There have been so many studies, of course, about the decline of the editor population, as well as the problematic demographics. It's widely understood that 8 out of 10 Wikipedians are male, white North Americans. Um, but there have been enormous studies about
Western.
the decline, yeah, white and Western, about the declining editors and editors who are kind of like aging out a little bit of the process or getting burnt out or moving on to something else. So that is one of the threats of sustainability facing the community is that it simply doesn't have the number of editors, and it's not attracting new editors in the same way that it once was.
Yeah, I think that the one of the comments that started to come out from the right wing was that clearly these all must be paid editors, right? There must be money that's flowing into this because no one would do this for free, right?
Yeah.
So it's clearly part of some left wing conspiracy. They're paying people to be Wikipedia editors, which, of course, it's just like the protesters, right? They just can't imagine that people would do this without some compensation.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so
Yeah,
I think we
it's
should go ahead.
oh no, the problem is that I mean there is money. There's just no one's getting paid for it, right? I mean, and what I mean is that these community groups are supported by fundraising from the Wikimedia Foundation in different ways, but it's mostly about continuing to build that community, right? And especially in places like South America and Africa, where you know investments in the community could help build a larger network of more diversified editors. And the thing is, we need to recognize that like Wikipedia, it's got lots of different persnickety issues, right? It's widely covered that there have been there's major systemic bias issues as well as just internal bias, coverage, and a lot of this comes from a mostly homogenous editor group. But I will say that despite that, the mostly homogenous editor group is still trying really, really hard. And for the most part, I think that they're recognizing that this is fun for them, but it's a privilege, right? Like it's a privilege to have the type of education to interact in this way. It's a privilege to have the time to do this, which is why people are aging out. They have kids, they don't have time to do this. They have other things. But there are a lot of groups out there that are trying to diversify editors and recruitment of editors, but it's not easy. It's not straightforward because this isn't just a fun thing that everybody could do and wants to do, right?
Right.
If you said to everybody like, oh hey, here's some skis, would you like to go skiing? Here's a free ski pass, and we can maybe a lot of people would be like yeah, that sounds cool, because otherwise I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't have skis or money to go to the. But here, people are like, you want me to write a Wikipedia article? What? So it's definitely a different approach that you need to sell it to the folks about the same things that Matt was just talking about, because like I think this is why a lot of people do it. It's the idea that they can make a difference,
They can get
right?
involved.
They can make a change. They can diversify the knowledge, right? And like in this day and age, nobody feels like they have any power over anything. So just little tiny bits can really, really help people feel like they can make a difference, even
Yeah.
if it's the tiniest thing.
Well, and I think I want us to come back to ways that people can get involved and the sort of pipelines for people to have involvement. But it seems like one of the more pressing problems at the moment, and that you have both been focusing on in more of your recent writing, is the artificial intelligence engines and LLMs that are kind of standing in for and producing the research that everyday people are using, a lot of which is trained on Wikipedia articles. Uh, so, what are the problems that this causes for both the LLMs and for Wikipedia?
Mhm.
And what's the scope of the problem? Do we know?
I don't think we quite know the scope of the problem. What we do know is that there definitely seems to be the opportunity for ChatGPT and other similar websites to divert traffic away from Wikipedia. If it's not already happening, it will be happening soon. I tend to think it's already happening. As we discussed right before the show, ChatGPT has surpassed Wikipedia on that top 10 most trafficked websites list. But
Yeah.
when users are detoured away from Wikipedia and towards ChatGPT, they may get a lot of the same information, or they may get what they think they want, right? Which is a quick answer. However, it often comes without any of the transparent social process of knowledge creation that Wikipedia has, is known to be able to show us in terms of references, showing kind of the provenance of the information, the edit history, the talk page, like the actual kind of social and dynamic construction of the information in any given article. But the other big problem is that if users are being diverted from the encyclopedia, they're less likely to encounter one of those infamous donation ads,
Sure.
which I'll tell you that the best way to get rid of those is to actually just log in. If you log in, if you have an account, they disappear. Um, but anyways, those particular users don't become potential donors, which Wikimedia as a nonprofit is relies on, but they also don't become people who are like, oh, maybe I'd like to get more involved in this particular enterprise.
So they're not donating, they're not using the actual resource, and then they're also one of the other problems is that they don't they don't even know that there are sources. They aren't identifying the citations. They're not kind of seeing the way that knowledge is produced and kind of finding out how you would track down what that piece of knowledge was. Right? It's a that detour is a pretty big deal overall. So I mean
Yeah,
that detour is definitely happening, but even without that detour, there's also this issue of it scraping the information. Yes, it kind of takes the information. One of the potential problems is that you say in one of your pieces that Wikipedia is an archive, but it isn't a static archive, right? It's always changing. That resource is always
Right.
changing, and it's unclear. With those articles constantly changing, I think as you put it in your article, when Wikipedia's data is used as a training set rather than an active archive, it loses the benefits of dynamic updates, collaborative curation, structured metadata, and user participation, which seems like a real design flaw for the LLMs.
Yeah, so I mean, this is just the way that LMs work, and it's becoming even more of a problem than even this kind of initial detour and static kind of approach. The What's happening is not only is Wikipedia getting detoured, but right now everything's getting detoured, right? So all of these small little small little papers, if they exist anymore, any of the little online places that are relying on clicks, that are relying on ad revenue, they are starting to lose massively because people aren't going there. They're just asking questions to ChatGPT or whoever else. And this is creating a really difficult situation because what's happening is you imagine it's kind of like a pyramid, right? Where you have these secondary sources down at the bottom that are what creates Wikipedia, right? And you've got Wikipedia, which is reliant on those secondary sources and could, if you click back through them, could then provide traffic back, right?
Right.
Now, both of these are getting detoured, right? And then you have the LLMs that are being trained on these things that they're the ones sucking off all of the potential revenue from these. And what you have now is this kind of collapse that we're going to be losing more and more potential for creating a new sources for Wikipedia to then update, right? So now we have this kind of multifaceted kind of multimodal destruction of knowledge production, right? Like the entire economy of knowledge here starts to break down, and after that, then you also have to realize these things are thirsty, right? And they want more, and what happens, and they've showed it over and over again, that when you start feeding LLMs date, information that they're producing, you end up with model autophagy disorder and model collapse, where it, if nothing else, it becomes basically useless because it can't give you anything right? So now you've gotten this thing, it's just this Ouroboros, right? It's eaten everything else. Finally, it's going to eat itself, but the unfortunate thing is at that point, it will have already eaten a lot of the infrastructure, and it's happening at an accelerated rate right now because of the way in which, to link to some of the other things we've talked about and probably will as well. For example, Grok.
Grokipedia.
So Grok back in June had this big thing. Yeah. That Musk's new thing got updated, and all of a sudden within 2 days it became Mecha Hitler.
Yes.
And the reason why Grok became Mecha Hitler is because there's two ways to get an AI to agree with you, right? One is you shape the training database, right, with a new type of reality, right? Or two, you give it specific imperatives to follow instructions. Now, they gave Grok an imperative to be anti-woke. And what they got was Grok is like, I am trained on this database that is based off of what we refer to as consensus reality, right? Consensus reality is Wikipedia, right? So it's like, this is what I understand as reality, right? But now you're saying be anti-woke. So and all the computer wants to do is answer your question. It's like a Mr. Meeseeks in Rick and Morty, right? Like you press the, like, hello, how can I help you? And then, but if it can't, it gets frustrated because it's like, I don't know how to do this. I can't be anti-woke because woke is, all of the data says that this is what we should be doing. Like, maybe women are people too. What's wrong with you? So what it did instead is it breaks its own reliability to be able to then, and that's why it does this whole like Mecha Hitler thing, because it wants to be ridiculous. It finds this new way. So it's subverting that. So what Musk is trying to do, and this is why Grokipedia is out. Grokipedia is not for people to read. And I guarantee you that if you look at Grokipedia and all the edits, I'll bet you less than 10% of those edits were made by people. It's all being made by the chatbot. This is Grok writing its own synthetic data. It's been given instructions to create the database that it will then be trained on, so that it can be a racist, awful, right-wing slob,
sure,
without breaking its own system.
Well, it can also cite.
That's the whole reason for Grok.
They'll let it cite Stormfront and Infowars as well. They're bringing some out external sources. But and that essay that
are we going to call? Yes, you're right. Yeah, the external sources of racist and quite literally, neo-Nazi
conspiracy theorists
groups.
Yes. Well, in itself, I mean, this is one of the other things that the piece that you all shared about Grokipedia, maybe about what they said, like 58% of it is just basically ingesting all of Wikipedia. It's basically just repeating it. And then, but then on top of that, it adds Stormfront, it adds Infowars, and then it adds its own kind of hallucinations. It's citing its own responses to queries on X, which are not fact checked or sourced. They're creating this new kind of what some researchers call an LLM auto cytogenesis, I guess is how you would say that, which not only creates bad information, but like you say, fingers crossed, it could make the whole model collapse. but this is standing
Let's
in
hope that
for
happens before everything else collapses.
yes, well, for Grokipedia especially, but many of these other uh, databases or the LLMs have their own problems in their database because of this, right? This is a
Right.
uh, they're producing citations, or people are using LLMs to
Yep.
make edits to Wikipedia, which they actually had to create this speedy deletion process a few months ago to help the editors get rid of this kind of AI slop that people were posting in in Wikipedia uh, as fact, right? This stuff. So it was already
Right.
so that there's that problem as well.
Yeah. There's a really fascinating project page in Wikipedia. And when I say project page, I just mean like it's a meta page where they're discussing some issue. But it's called Signs of AI Writing, like Wikipedia colon Signs of AI Writing. And it is perhaps one of the most robust articles for actually human, how can humans determine whether something is written by AI? Because, I mean, and this is true, especially in the English language version, so many of its editors are exhausted, burnt out, and they don't want to have to go through and clean up the AI slop. The Wiki
Mhm.
Education program, they even introduced some new training modules as well as kind of a more, GPT-0 or similar AI detector that would flag when students try to actually use AI to edit Wikipedia. Um, but as a whole, like the English community is very much and bringing any kind of AI into the encyclopedia. And there was actually an uproar, was it last summer, where there's a staff team called Future Audiences who are really trying to think about how can we compete with all of these other, chat GPTs plus short form video and no one reads
Hmm.
anymore. What can we actually do to make Wikipedia relevant to, whatever, Gen Z or something? And they proposed putting AI summaries at the top of every article. Like this was an experiment in progress by Wikimedia Foundation's staff, the Future Audiences team, that was it's called Simple Summaries, I believe, completely rejected by the actual editor community of volunteers. Because really they already have the lead of
That's what
every
the lead's
article.
for. That's
Yeah,
what
the
the
lead is
introduction is.
supposed to be, it's just this would be an automated summary. But so it's really
Right.
interesting to see the volunteer community actually push back even against the paid staff of the foundation,
Hmm.
engineers and such, as they try to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do now to stay relevant?
Maybe they should just label it differently, just at the top instead of calling it the introduction. Just say human intelligence summary.
Yeah,
This
there
is
you
this
go.
is humans read this and then they summarized it, and
Yeah,
this is something that people used to do not too long ago. Humans would read something and then they would tell you what it said. um,
I'd be
uh,
in favor of that.
I mean, I think they could go for it.
If only we could
You
just keep going back to there.
well, so you all in one of your recent articles, you did this sort of structured interview with 6 experts that discussed the problems about this intersection between LLMs and Wikipedia. Um, and I mean, maybe we have time for at least a summary here. But what did you find in those interviews, and what was surprising uh, as to what they had to say about that intersection?
I'll say it's probably not surprising, especially now, because I don't know. Did we initiate this project maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, something like that, Zach? But it's probably not surprising to people that all of these experts who are largely people at the intersection of computer science and Wikimedia agreed that Wikimedia projects and Wikipedia especially is under threat in the current um, internet economy, right? Especially from large language models. One of the things that we didn't expect was that, I was really interested in learning more about how Wikipedia is actually utilized in the training of these models, right? Do they use, because Wikipedia is valuable because it's not only natural language, right? But it's also like very well structured natural language. With, you can do completeness scores of a particular article. You can look at meta, you can look at talk page, you can look at references, the organization of a particular article. So it's very structured. But when we tried to get more, to really drill down and get more granularity about exactly how it's being used to train these models, we couldn't get much. Like even people who had worked in both industry for Microsoft on AI projects, as well as being longtime Wikipedians that have done machine learning projects, couldn't really tell us except to say that yes, it's definitely being used, probably heavily. There are probably a couple different rounds of training which could reinforce different factors and different elements of data from Wikipedia. But it's very much still a black box. That was pretty surprising.
That is surprising.
Yeah.
Um, well, so uh, maybe so I want to make sure we talk about representation, because this is something that Zach, you've written quite a bit about, and representation here is not just in terms of the representation of reality or the representation of fact, but there's an argument that you're making about representation or Wikipedia helping with uh, basically balancing equity in representation and access. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what the Wikimedia, how the Wikipedia model helps with that, and what are the challenges it still faces in terms of access, bias, knowledge gaps, and representation.
Yeah, so I mean, Wikipedia has this, really crazy dream of uh, providing every person on the planet free access to the sum of all human knowledge, right? And that is already obviously like how could you have the sum of all human knowledge? Every single second there's more, right? So it's an impossible, but not that it's not a good thing to work towards, but it's obviously impossible to finish. But it also means that you need to figure out what is human knowledge, and then what does access mean? Does access mean that we also now provide everybody with the internet? Does access mean that every single person has to have it in their native language? And the answers to both of those is maybe yes. Um, and so there's a lot going on there. Now on top of that, you have this like what counts as knowledge, what is out, which is also hindered by systemic issues within knowledge because even now, like we will definitely still have people who have, biases who write about, who will write about a man over a woman in science, things like just even that being like has happened multiple times in the last, decade. But then thinking about, for example, the historical
Sure.
kind of amount of information that is out there that is already biased, right? As well as the bias around certain cultures that are not that are still oral cultures that are
Sure.
or cultures that prioritize oral histories and things like that. It's the there's multiple kind of things in the way. Now, that being said, the Wikipedia community really does care about this idea of like how do we capture as much as we can without opening up to well, every knowledge counts because you do want reliable information, right? You don't want Breitbart, right? You don't want my crazy Uncle Bobby's blog.
Sure. Infowars.
Want things that are
Yeah.
reliable. I don't want Infowars, things like that. So to be able to kind of like bring that together, it's there's no right answer. It's attention, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, there also are people who realize that these things are major issues that need to be addressed in more active ways. So that you have groups like Wiki Project Women in Red, which, you know, when they started, they were like, oh, well, I believe the amount of biographies of women on Wikipedia was like, I think it was like 13% or something like that, and now it's like 20%. And this is tens of thousands of biographies have been written because people are like, no, we need to do better. And so the ability for Wikipedia to change, the ability for the community to say, we believe in this, we care about this, and we're not doing this for money. We're doing this, you know, for the love of the game. We're doing this to make the world better. Uh, is never going to be something that you're going to get out of these new systems, right? And it can constantly, as long as we continue to work towards those types of goals, we're gonna we might not be okay, but we're going to continue to get better. And I think that gives me a lot of hope with Wikipedia because you know, we really just we want to see more representation, more ideas, better how to fight against some of these biases the best we can. You can't fix it all, but you can do
Sure.
something. And there's a lot of things you can do.
And there's processes in place to do that. Um, well, so I wanted to just
Exactly.
before my teaching
And there
job
might be new
was
ones
so
to do
rudely.
it.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I want to just sort of finish on is you know, before my teaching job was so rudely terminated, I frequently taught your book in conjunction with the Wikipedia EDU program, which assists college instructors to develop a course module. It's a, you know, 10-12 week course module that helps introduce students into the Wikipedia editing project. And this program is a key pipeline for new editors. Um, and but Darius Jamelniak, the in the article that you passed along, had an even more hands-on approach. He says that, quote, the time for passive consumption has expired. Every scholar should be contributing their expertise to Wikipedia, not as charity, but as a core duty.
Mhm.
So, what can all of us
Agreed.
do to help retain Wikipedia as a resource? And are there some of us that should be more involved than others? I mean, I think that, you know, this question of how many white cishet guys like us are doing the editing. I don't know how to combat that. But you know, what should scholars, academics, people in general do to help sustain Wikipedia as a resource?
I like to very much offer to academic audiences, more broader audiences, that there are lots of different levels of engagement. You don't have to go all in and, you know, become an editor and then ask your students to edit your, you know, you can teach Wikipedia. Right now is a great time to teach Wikipedia in terms of like the academic audience to juxtapose it with kind of AI epistemologies and Wikipedia's epistemology. Put those side by side to really show how Wikipedia can teach us where AI is lacking in things like provenance and transparency, etc. But there are multiple ways to get involved, even if you're just asking students to look more critically at it or asking students to engage with it. You don't necessarily have to edit. There's also ways to donate. You can get involved with like local chapters, user groups, those sorts of things. Um, I run an academic initiative in my field of writing studies called the Four Cs Wikipedia Initiative, and we also have Wiki Project Writing, which tries to get other academics, like Jamelniak
Mhm.
says, to like actually edit in their particular field. But it's a tough sell, you know, it's a really tough sell to academics for a lot of the same reasons that it's always been, is that these things aren't really worth anything in the academic economic kind of scheme of things, right? They're not going to necessarily help you get promotion and tenure, etc. But
Sure.
engaging with it can help you as Zach kind of argues for, like, advocate for missing knowledge in the field, or advocate for like better representing people and topics that have been marginalized.
Well,
Yeah, and
go
I
ahead.
think that to add to that is that from an academic perspective, I think that obviously everything's broken, right? So the idea that these very particular kind of journals that are nobody can read unless you have $400 a year or a month subscription, or through your library, and that kind of garbage, is that's the issue. Is that what we and I've talked to a few folks. I'm gonna I actually have a talk in April where I'm gonna be going to a department and talking to them about, now calling it altmetrics, but the altmetrics of Wikipedia. It's like, how do you get your knowledge out there?
Yeah.
How do you get your knowledge out there? How do you represent others in there? Because this is where we want the knowledge to be, so others can access it. Stop locking your stuff up in your ivory tower. Talk to people, especially when it's stuff about like making the world a better place. And so that's really one of the big approaches that I want to continue. Like, obviously, I've been doing the teaching as well, and that's great. But like, when it comes to how do we as academics do it, we can get involved, and we can get our stuff. And it's not easy because you don't want to be citing yourself, right, with a conflict of interest. But
Sure.
there are ways to get more. I think Matt and I remember I was at a Wikipedia conference and somebody said, "Oh, we wrote an article that is cited in the Wikipedia article, citation needed," and everyone around was like, "Ooh." So this is how you get nerds to be really interested in
Sure.
you.
Make it a competition. Well, I encourage other everyone to check out ways that you can get involved at Wikipedia. It's definitely better than just looking for something in ChatGPT or asking Claude. I appreciate the open access books that you both have been publishing on this. I know you have a new one in the works, Wikipedia and Beyond, with MIT Press. I know that's going to come out any day, or be complete any day. But thanks so much for talking with us about this, and for your work on this important piece of common knowledge. Our next episode will air on March 24th. That's a Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we'll speak with Professor Stephen Saliata about the concept of scholasticide, which is in many ways related to what we're talking about today. His earlier experience with these processes, particularly in relation to the suppression of information and scholarship about Israel-Palestine, and his new book, which is actually a work of fiction. So if you're joining us on YouTube, it'll be streaming there again. This episode will also be available on the Breaking Culture Live YouTube channel. Please share it with your colleagues and let us know if you have any ideas for future episodes or invitees by emailing us at breakingculturelive@gmail.com. Thanks again for joining us. Again, I'm Sean Johnson Andrews. Please check out my Substack at breakingculture.substack.com. And until next time, take care.